Stuart Holbrook has spent his life in the world of collectors. As president of Theriaut, the world's leader in the auction of antique dolls and figurative art for over 30 years, he's managed the often personal and always wild world of collecting and collectors. His market expertise and knowledge of trends comes to life in The Curious Collector, where he shares his experience and experiences in real-life stories, alongside sage advice on how to build great collections within the happy life of a collector.
Welcome back to part 3 of a conversation with Florence Theriault and 55 years of dolls. Here at The Curious Collector, I'm Stuart Holbrook and glad to have you all with us. And Florence, welcome back for more memories and more conversations and going into 100 different stories and tangents that we've been going on, but that's part of the fun here. And I'm glad you could make it back for this third part.
Glad to be here.
So
First time I've had you listen to me in a long time. So
I know.
I have the control here. I'm happy. I'm just teasing you.
Perfect. You've been fantastic. And I love some of the stories and encourage you to go off in these different thought processes of different things that pop up in your mind during this time, because you're filled with so many great memories and stories over these 55 years. And not to make you sound old, because you are still cranking it out there with your YouTube videos and your cataloging and all the work and research that you're doing. You are an amazing figure. So the 2000s came along and wow. And I talk about this in my lectures and being a paradigm shift, if you will, in the world of collecting and collectors and the markets and how we engage in the hobby. And it was gradual at first, but we've really seen now in retrospect over these 25 years, a lot of the different ways that people engage the art of collecting in their lives. And the biggest one, of course, and the one that you've touched on a little bit in a positive way, is the aspect of the internet. You have had basically your feet in both worlds. The pre-internet and the days you talked about of the 70s and 80s when research was scattered in books and you had to really spend days and weeks sometimes doing work that now on the internet you could do in minutes. So give me some of your thoughts on this and the things you liked about the internet from the idea of your work and your career and the things that you didn't like.
Well, I'll talk to you first of all about what I didn't like, and I'll talk to you in reference to the auctions. I don't want to sound like an old fogey here talking about it, but oh my God, those early days of auctions when you had to be there. People were there. They saw the objects. They interacted with an item. They knew if they had a tactile love of that particular item, and seeing it, whether in our catalogs or whether it's online or any other way. I don't get it that people don't really have the need to see an object in its own person. But it was exciting. People would come in and they would see each other, and there would be people greeting each other that they hadn't seen in a long time. And it was just such an exciting, different time. It was wonderful to have the auctions. You know, when we first started our doll auctions, the only way you could bid, 2 ways. You could be there or you could give us an absentee bid. The only 2 ways. Then, after we were insured about 5 years, we moved slowly. I remember the collector, Mr. Rosenberg in Manhattan, and said, why can't I bid by phone? Why can't you call me and let me bid with the time it's going up? And we said, oh, we never thought of that. Well, okay, we did that. We started letting people do telephone bidding. So that added to it. And then all of a sudden, we had a hard time communicating or getting bids from around the world because there really wasn't any way to have really rapid communication with them. And then along comes, well, it was really earlier, it was in the 80s. The fax was a miracle machine. I'll never forget getting our first fax machine, and all of a sudden you could get these bids from people right away. And it was wonderful. So our whole business started increasing internationally with that. Remember the old fax paper? It was like a oily sort of paper, and the print on it would fade after about a week or so. I'm really revealing myself now. Okay, so then you could have bids that way. And then along came people being able to send us an email with their bids. And even Ruth Nibergelt, whose collection we sold last July. Do you remember Ruth Nibergelt?
Yes.
Ruth Nibergelt's bids always came in. She came in on a fax and then eventually came in on fax by email.
And she used to walk 2 miles, Florence, in the snow in Switzerland to go to the post office to be able to fax her bid in.
Exactly. And I remember we would be traveling with our auction, so we always had to make sure that somebody went to the office on Saturday morning to check the fax machine and see if any other last-minute bids had come in on the fax machine, because you couldn't get them by email. All of these, I'm leading up to say that the internet has been a real boon to our industry. And I don't know about every auctioneer, but it has been to us, because we've been able to have not only more international communication with people, but we've been able to have more rapid communication with people. And now, as we approach the COVID years, we just learned how absolutely vital that was. And I know you're going to want to discuss that later probably, but it was very intriguing to me how the internet has impacted our whole business over the years. And I mean, I really have to say, times change, and I'm okay with it. I'm okay. I just miss people sometimes, because I'm a look them in the eye and talk to people.
Do you think of it like the earlier days of your doing auctions and leading up well into the 90s? Do you think of that as being more of what would be the term, a genteel age?
No, it wasn't particularly genteel. I wouldn't say that.
Okay, so much for that concept.
Do you want me to tell you some stories about early auctions? They weren't always genteel, let me tell you.
No, that is true. That is
true. Okay, there was a time that I remember a gentleman from Michigan, and he had medical issues, but he also had a lot of money. So he would fly in on his private, I don't know what it was, but he landed right on
a private jet.
Yeah, but no, I think it was a helicopter, because he landed on the hotel grounds. And then he had his caregiver, and they would wheel out a gurney or whatever, and they would put him on it, and they would wheel him into the hotel room, and he would sit there or lay there, and he would bid. And I'm telling you now, we weren't always genteel. There was a Lynchy doll, and he kept bidding and bidding on it. And finally, this one woman who had traveled down from New York to get this doll, and she wanted it. And she was sitting on the other side of the room, and all of a sudden she stood up and she leaned over, because she had to lean way over to see him, because he was lying down on the other side of the room. And it's great. She said, "Will a man ever stop bidding?" And okay, that wasn't very kind. Two nice people, both of them, but they got to know each other, and they were happy that after a while they got to know each other. But they were just fun times. They were good laughing times, and that's all right. Times change, and you got to go with times, because you're not going to change times. Things aren't going the way they were, so you got to go with them. That's all.
In this case, I would agree. And, it's funny you talk about that, how exciting and energizing those rooms were in the auctions, and the drama that would ensue sometimes at these auctions. And ultimately, that's what's caused a lot of people to pull back from going to these events and bidding on the internet, because they like the privacy. They don't want the drama. As one woman I was recently sitting in her living room who said she's never going back to going to an auction in person. She says, because now it's so nice, people can mind their own damn business.
Well, Stuart, what's really funny are the people that come to our auctions, actually come to the auctions and then sit there and do the bidding on the internet, on the phone, while they're sitting in the audience, because they don't want other people sitting there to know they're bidding. So they just pretend they're making a phone call or texting somebody, but actually they're bidding.
Where before it was always a drama-filled room, and it was wild for sure. So I guess my use of the term genteel was definitely not the right one, but perhaps it's more genteel now. So one of the big changes that happened in the age of the internet, and you saw the steady shift of collectors utilizing the access of seeing dolls, learning about dolls, reading about dolls on the internet versus holding a book. And we saw it even with our auction catalogs. We were reaching more people than we've ever reached before with our auction catalogs, but they were primarily engaging it in a digital manner. And I know you have some thoughts on this.
Oh, I have thoughts, and they're very strong thoughts, because we're constantly in a dispute over Stuart sometimes saying, well, I'm not sure we even need to have a print catalog. And I'm saying, oh, well, then when you don't need a print catalog, I'm done, because I am still a believer in books. And there are so many things that privacy, that sense of ownership when you have a book in your hand, whether it's an auction catalog or a good novel you're reading or any kind of a book, that you're sitting in a chair with a light over you and you're absorbed in that book. I'm sorry, there's no computer screen that's ever going to give you that kind of thing, because you're going to have a million other interruptions going on your screen at the same time, of something popping up or an email or a text or an ad or anything. And it's not the same. But the solitude, the peace that you get from having that catalog and looking at it. And I have had so many people say that to me. I looked at your catalog online and now I'm seeing the catalog. It's not the same thing. It's not the same. Yeah, it is the same, but it's not the same.
And then I have a lot of people who say, Florence, and I know this is the hard thing. Oh, yeah, the books are nice, but where do I put them? I much prefer looking online. It's great. And it's the one thing you can't do on a book is bid. And the nice thing with the digital catalogs is, boom, you press a button and you bid. It's right there. It's easy. And so I get it. There's arguments for both sides. And I think it's a personal choice in what you prefer. I know you come from a romantic period of, and you said it earlier, in I believe part one of this conversation, that how important books are and have been to your life.
I've said my piece.
Okay. We're so not editing that out, because that was perfect. Yeah, there was just like this moment of complete silence. Like, I am not even going to get into this argument. So that's good. It's fine. Listen, I talked about the private side of you and that you maybe don't think of it yourself, but you are a private person in many ways. And in that sense, you never really shared with people some of the struggles you've gone through during your career in balancing both this company and your work, which is 7 days a week, 10, 12 hours a day, often going home and working there in the evenings as well. So I wanted to kind of allow you a chance to talk a little bit about something that was a difficult time in your life and to share with people how you balanced it, because I think it's also a lesson for others who, hey, we're all walking each other down the road and we're all dealing with different things in one form or another. But my stepfather, George, your husband, was diagnosed with Parkinson's in the early 90s. And you dealt with many years right up until the end in 2008 when he passed away, with not only balancing this business, but taking care of the declining health over many years of a man you loved. And I'm hoping this is a chance for you to share how you did it and what it meant to you, and helping to inspire others who may be going through a similar thing.
Well, when I talked before, and I talked about in one of the previous episodes, and I talked about this letter that I had received in 1978 and that I always kept framed on my wall. And I said that I kept it because it helped me to become a better person and to be more aware of younger people starting out in our business and how I could help them and how I could be kind to them. I take that same kind of philosophy to what I went through when I took care of George. He had Parkinson's starting in the 1990s, and he wasn't terribly bad until about 2003 or 4. And then it became quite bad. And that's okay. We made it through, and he stayed at home, and I was able to afford to have care come in and take care of him and help me take care of him during the day so I could come to work. And that gave me an ability to keep growing as a person, because I was able to, as candidly as I could say it, not have to be in the middle of it 24 hours a day. Well, what that has given me, and I thank George because he has helped me through it, was the way when people call us. And, we used to joke, our names were George and Florence. And I said, oh my God, those are old people's names. And then all of a sudden one day we woke up and I said, oh, we've grown into our names. But so many of the people that we had grown up with over the past 50 years, or at that point, 40 years, had become fast friends. And many of them were a bit older than us when we started. So now they were really old. And now I've lost George, and many of those people are still around. And when they call and they're thinking of selling their dolls or something, and it's either the wife may have passed on and the husband is thinking of selling their dolls, or she's just taking care of him and she doesn't know what to do. And I feel like I can talk to them with knowledge about what they're going through. And I feel like it's something caring is what I want to pass on to these people as much as anything. They'll make their own decision what they're going to do with their dolls, and I'm able to guide them to some extent. But mostly, since COVID in particular, Stuart, people have gotten so lonely, and they're just so alone in the world. Everyone feels this way. And I had help. I had help when I was going through this with George, and now I want to be able to pass it on and share it with other people. Just compassion and caring, and you're not ever alone. You just have to find somebody that will talk to you. Did that kind of ramble on and on?
No, I think it's very poignant, and I think it's something within the collecting world. Let's face it, collecting is a endeavor that should hopefully last a lifetime. And in that process, especially these days, people are living so long, they're facing hurdles. And we are in these conversations and the mix of it quite often, myself included. And you show empathy based on experience that I think is powerful, and it's translated to me as well. And I think this is the thing to understand the human side of the business, and something you've given to Theriaults over the years in always reminding me, especially during what we often call my young Turk years of the early 90s, of compassion, empathy, and understanding of collectors and what this is in their lives.
You know, when people get older, I can use myself as an example. You see life really differently from the way you ever saw it before. Things don't matter that did matter before, and things that didn't matter really matter now. People can be very lonely. I've been fortunate with my 2 sons. I am so blessed that way that I cannot tell you, because I talk to families all the time that do not have the fortunate circumstance I have of 2 great guys, really great guys. I wish they wouldn't nag me all the time about drinking enough water, but that's okay. I'll put up with it. But I see people that don't have that, or that they have families that have not been right by them, or that have families that have so many needs of their own, and they're just lonely. And I just feel great compassion for them. I really do. I don't know. COVID and changing circumstances of our society have just made it very, very difficult for people. And I just wish that everybody could just take a few minutes every day just to reach out to one person that they might think would be alone. Make one call a day.
This is something that I think our business is very unique in you're dealing with really emotional objects that connect to people's entire lives, and is in many cases best hours of their days are spent around their dolls, and the joy that they have brought them through so many different changes is the one constant people have. And I think that I wanted to let you talk, but I think it's an interesting conversation for us both to have, and how this business is one of the few that really forces you to a point of understanding and compassion, and where other businesses tend to be more transactional and cold. This is something
the other thing, Stuart, is that I find in talking to older people, myself being one of them, there's a practicality there about life that doesn't exist when people are younger. People get it. They know what's going to happen. And That's okay, because they're living their life now, and they just want to be honest. And you know what, they want to laugh a little bit too. And you can make jokes that might even be not politically proper these days, or that might be a little off or something, but they get it because they've been living their life. And, you know, you're not going to shock them anymore. They just want peace, and they want friendship, and they want a little bit of caring, and that's okay.
So we made it up to like 2020, and this was a big moment. In January of 2020, Theriault celebrated its 50th anniversary with a pretty wild event in Santa Barbara, California at the Ritz-Carlton. And we sold the legendary collection of Huguette Clark, which talk about, I mean, it was like poetry, how it all came together for the 50th anniversary, because Huguette Clark had been a story that followed you pretty much from the very first days you began doll auctions in the 70s. Take us back a little bit about Huguette Clark and how this paralleled your entire career and then led to this one moment in 2020.
Well, it's true. It was early on, and we had this phone call from an attorney in Manhattan, and he said, I have a client who wants to bid on doll at your auctions. This was after we started taking phone bids, understand, so we were okay then. So we said, okay. So he registered, and he said, I will be doing the bidding. And I'd say, fine, could I have the name of your client? And he said, my client's name will not be known. My client is unnamed to you. Okay. So that's how we operated with him for the next how many years? 30 or 40 years. We didn't know it was a she. We knew nothing. We only dealt through one attorney, and then eventually he died, and another attorney took over the commission. And always they were the person who would do the bidding for the client, and the objects would be delivered to their office. We never knew who it was. One time, I guess the attorney was going to be busy, so they had an antique dealer in Manhattan do the bidding for them, and the antique dealer dropped out of the bidding. Well, there was to be paid because this was not what they were supposed to do.
The client did not ever lose, period.
This is correct. And we had to go through and turn over mountains to try to get that doll back for that client because she was determined to have it. It became like a game with us to try to figure out who this client was. I think it was Helena Rubinstein. There was a big ad of her once in a magazine showing her doll collection. We were determined, okay, it's Helena Rubinstein. And then other things would come along and we would decide it was this person or that person because they were buying expensive dolls. They clearly had some money to spend.
Can I just say you sound like collectors today who are always trying to figure out who the other people are bidding against them online. You sound exactly the same.
Okay, whatever. But we didn't spend that much time on it. And then finally somebody, it was Ralph Habor in New Jersey. Ralph Habor, that's a great story. We had an auction in New Jersey. And this man came in and he just sat there all day. He didn't do anything. He sat over in the corner of the room. You know, you're kind of wondering who he is. Well, at the end of the auction, he came up and he was just very old-fashioned gentleman. He said, I have some doll bodies in my garage that my wife had. Would you be interested in those? And we said, well, we're up here anyway. We'll go over and look at them the next morning. Well, he had thousands of doll bodies. And the worst part was they were mostly disassembled. So we said, okay, we'll take these and sell them. And we brought them back. I have memories to this day. I took an entire warehouse and I had all of the bodies laid out and the parts. And it was like putting a puzzle together. I never realized until that time. You talk about doing research, how many different doll bodies there were for like a German bisque baby. It was an astronomical business. Now, see, is that a piece of information you don't have? I want to tell you, Mary Ann Cieslik said to me once, oh, Florence, when we were talking about research, she said, you are so lucky. I said, why? I haven't seen these dolls that I'm researching and writing about. I don't even know what some of them look like. I just have the information, but you've seen them all. And that's a great gift that I've had. I will tell you, I'm very thankful for it. Well, anyway.
It's true. Yeah.
Anyway, back,
Hugh Clark.
What was the topic? Right, yeah. I forgot. Okay.
We were Hugh Clark. We were talking about that. Yeah.
All right. So anyway, we got to be friendly with Ralph Habor. And it turned out his wife had a fabulous collection, which we ended up selling. But anyway, in the meantime, we were talking to him about this. He said, I think I know who that person is. She had a thing about the Jameau phonograph doll. And every time we had one, she would buy it. And he said, I used to repair Jameau phonograph dolls for her, I think. For someone that sounds like that. And he described where she was. And I think he knew her name. And then we found a book about something about the family. And so we had a little clue, but it wasn't much. And, we were on busy working, so we never went any further until the story came out.
Broke. Right.
The news broke until the news broke. And we went on from there.
And so in 2020, I want to have you recount the moment where you brought a hush and a moment of panic across a room of a few hundred people that had come to our 50th anniversary celebration and banquet there at the Ritz-Carlton, because for years you had said,
yeah, I want to sell the collection of the unknown client. It
was a dream of yours your whole life.
Yes. And when that happens, I'm ready to cash it in and say goodbye and go about my way. I'm leaving the dolls. So it came to the banquet for that auction, and I got up and I told about how this had been a vow I had made a long time ago, that if that ever came in my hands, I would be retiring. So I have an announcement to make now. I lied.
It was so perfect because you stopped, and just like you did here, and you hesitated. And I will never forget the gasps across the room of just sheer terror. No! And then you said, I lied. And everybody burst out clapping and a sigh of relief. The biggest sigh of relief was from me, because I was
probably, yes.
Yes. So it was a great moment. That was a great auction, and
it was so
wonderful coming together of so many old friends over 50 years and the stories that we shared. And then to not even know that 3 months later, it would feel like the whole world was falling apart. And wow, did it have a cataclysmic change into the world of auctions and how we did things. And I know for you was a difficult time.
Well, it was interesting. So if you remember it, we were one of the first of the people to make the decision. We already had our February auction scheduled.
Late March,
beginning of March, yeah. And that was already scheduled with the hotel and all. And it was probably sometime in February that we made our decision. We are not going to subject our staff to traveling and to going into an area where they, there's going to be around a lot of older people. Our staff are younger. They could even bring it to them, or they could get sick themselves. We were not going to do it. We would be holding the auction remotely. And that's what we did. But then came the edict from the government of the close down, that everything had to be closed down. Well, I found this loophole that if you owned a building or owned the property had to be checked into to make sure it was okay. So I checked into my property every single day, and I went into work every single day. And at first I was totally by myself. And then after 2 or 3 weeks, then little by little, I started having our staff come in if they could be like, it's a very big warehouse space divided into a lot of small offices. And as long as they could all be at least 50 feet away from each other, okay, they could come in and work and do the things that they have to do, where we could ship dolls out to people, and then as much as possible, people did their work from home. But again, I go back to, I don't look on this for me as an obstacle. I look at it as something I was very fortunate that I had this to do, because I think if I had stayed home, I just think I would have aged 20 years by staying home. All the things I dreamed that I could do for years, sit down and read all the books I keep ordering that pile up on the table because I'm too tired to read them at night. I could do that. I could do what a lot of doll collectors did. I could clean out my house and decide I'm going to call Theriaut and please come and get my dolls. I've got too many, or get my big dolls. I've got too many. I could have done those things, but I know I wouldn't have. And I was so happy to come to work. And then I could talk to people that would call, and things went on. And gradually, we came up with a way of having auctions, Stuart, and I will never forget you at those auctions because you are a performer. We did the auctions out of our front office, and Stuart was auctioning to a screen. That was all he had because nobody could be there. But it was so great because you would get letters from people saying, I don't understand why you couldn't let me come to that auction. I know you had people there. And you would have to be saying, no, there was nobody there.
I had to learn quickly to imagine a crowd. And you're right. I had years of auctioning in front of all this crowd that was engaging me and laughing with me. And they were my fuel. They were my power. And suddenly I didn't. And so I had to imagine people. And that was the only way I could do it, was to pretend that they were there. Luckily, I had enough years of experience of being in that situation that I could create in my mind's eye an audience. But it was definitely a unique experience, but it really ended up changing everything in the perspective of auctions.
And we found out later that people would say, well, okay, let's turn around and they'd say to their husband, tomorrow is my auction day. I'm going in the other room. I'm taking my computer with me. Do not bother me all day unless you're bringing me lunch. And they would set themselves up at home as though they were attending an auction. And we learned to try to create an auction to make it as much of an event and not just have it be cold turkey, but just be a fun place to be as well. We just had to change our business model, and we did.
Through it, we came up with new solutions. 50 forward auctions were born. We did a lot of interesting things that have really, I think, gone along. As you said earlier, we didn't change the world changed and we went with it. And that's what we're dealing with now. And, we do major, huge events that in the 90s would have been 500 people in the audience. And now we have 30, but we have thousands online across the world. And so it's interesting. And I know for you, 55 years of this, you've seen everything. You've been there when George was on the back of a pickup truck for the first auction outside this garage and selling things for $2 and $3 with a handheld loudspeaker and a cowboy hat in the old Wild West days of the auctions. Right up through, you talked about the phone bidding and the fax machines and traveling the auction to different places. And then all up into this moment. And here we are. And you've seen it all. And you are documenting here in these three parts a lot of these experiences that have been truly remarkable.
You know what doesn't change? People's behavior and people's desires and people's love of the object, but also people's behavior, how they interact with each other. And maybe the ways they interact change, but people don't change. People are the same. And it sometimes gets clouded over by the methods in which they interact. And we have to fight not to let that happen. We have to always keep trying to remember that people are people. I know that sounds corny, and I hate to be sounding like that, but people's behavior does remain the same. And everyone's just looking for a little bit of kindness and a little bit of care from other people. And they find it in their collecting because they're able to have a little excitement that way. They can have the pursuit of something. You know, one of the things we always did with our auction, Stuart, to me that was very important, we always believed, look, everybody's got problems in their life. Everybody has to go to work every day. You might have problems with your family. You might have medical problems, whatever. So if you've chosen to come to an auction, whether you're doing it years ago by coming to the auction or whether you're doing it now by tuning in your computer, or some people putting it on a big screen, much to my regret, because I don't want to be seen that way.
And I have the same problem too. And not only that, but high definition. And my God, on a big screen in high definition is a sight to behold. That's why I love podcasting.
So no matter how you're doing it that way, they've come to the auction to escape some of the things in their life they'd rather not be thinking about 24 hours a day. They've come for a little fun, for a few laughs, for a little pleasure, maybe to acquire something that they will love, or maybe they'll be disappointed and lose it. It doesn't matter. They've come for that. And that's what we've always tried to do, is to make the auction something that you leave at the end of the day and you got a good memory of, something that you can think about on the bad times. And okay, I've had good times in my life. That's been our whole program. If you can get a good product as a result of it and something that you're proud of and that you will love, well, that's a bonus.
And that's a product of you. You have instilled this philosophy in Theriault's through these generations and through all these changes. And that's the one thing that has remained steadfast, is the ability to build an experience for people. And it may be different than it was in 1993. And I talk about this, how, Mildred Seeley auction, if you remember that, in 2003, which to me was sort of the last of, I'm not going to call it the genteel age anymore, but the drama age of the auction room, when you had 600 people fly in from all over the world and filled up a massive event hall in Vegas, to Rosalie Wilde, one of the greatest figures in history in 2024, one of the most beloved people, where I had 85 people in the audience, but I had thousands bidding online. And it's no different. They all want the same thing. They want an experience. And you have rolled with the punches and the changes through so many generations of collectors, of giving the people what they want, but giving it in a way that you feel proud of. And I think that is your legacy. So I want to wrap this up with two questions for you, which I always find are...
No, you're not getting a raise. Oh, go ahead.
Okay. As if I would tell you if I wanted one. I'll just take it.
Okay, whatever.
Yes. I wanted to ask you this. 55 years later, if you could write a letter to your younger self, this 28-year-old woman starting a business in this Wild West world of the auctions and the antique industry and all of it, if you could write a letter to that young lady, what would you say?
Wow. I would say to be true to myself more than I probably was. I would say if I had feelings about something, I should trust those feelings, but try to find a way to achieve them without causing any rancor or bitterness on anyone's part. I would continue to be very explorative in things I wanted to do. Stuart, and when I was young, what I always wanted to be was a pioneer. I don't know if you know that. I could have been a Wild West pioneer. I don't think I could have been an Annie Oakley because I don't have good enough eyesight, but I could have been a pioneer. It's what I wanted to be. And I wish I had had more courage to do the things I really wanted to do. That's all.
But maybe you don't give yourself enough credit, because I think of you as a pioneer. You were a pioneer in a different time in an industry that was the Wild West. And you will be thought of as a pioneer. So you have achieved it.
Oh, thank you. That's nice to hear. And I always wish I had longer legs, too, so I could have worn the kind of clothes that I really love.
Okay, so your letter to your younger self is somehow figure out how to get longer legs.
No, you know what my letter would have been, but I didn't know it then. My letter would have been, if I had known it, just shut up about the longer legs because you've got good health now when you're older. And I'll trade that off for that anytime. And that's a great gift of nature to me. It's not the long legs, but that I feel so sad for anyone who's my age who suffers all of the medical things that most people are suffering at my age. And I don't have them. And that's not anything I did. That's just grace. And I'm very grateful for it.
And I think people are very grateful for it as well, in that you continue to contribute and offer so much to the doll world in your research, your willingness to share, and your compassion for collectors as well. So I want to end it with one last question. A whole new generation of collectors is coming into the hobby, and we know through lots of research and data and that millennials will probably form one of the greatest collecting generations we've ever seen. And what would be your advice to new young collectors who might be listening to this podcast? They're just starting out in their collecting and they're hoping for direction or advice or your experience to tell them, which way do I go? What would you tell them?
Patience, which is not what you would tell them as the auctioneer up on the podium. You would tell them, you're never going to see another one. Better get this one. But I would tell them patience. Learn about your subject before you do anything. Study it, observe it. There are not a lot of shows anymore, so you don't have the option of going to a lot of shows and to study things. But find out other people who collect what you have. Talk to them. Learn about it. Be aware. Find out who are people you can really trust in talking to you. For example, when I'm cataloging now, I have learned over the years of people that I know their subject, know their particular niche that they're very, very deeply involved in, and that they have more knowledge than I do about that subject. And I have no hesitation calling them at all and asking for their help. That's what you need to learn to do. And then combine this patience and this studying of the subject. It's got to speak to you. You got to go back to that old-time collector notion of, is the doll speaking to me? I mean, sometimes people will call me and say, well, what do you recommend in this auction? And I'll think of what they bought in the past, and I'll look down in the auction and I'll say, well, 85 and 67 and 119 and so. These are dolls I think you'd like. And they will very quickly discard with two of those items. They have no feeling of those items whatsoever. But the other ones, okay, they love them, and now they know I recommend them. So that's something they're happy to go for. Speak to your heart, but also let your brain talk to you too. Don't be impatient in what you're going to buy. And hey, remember that old-time dealer I talked to you about that said every 2 years he picks a different subject and he goes deep diving into the knowledge of that and learning about that. You can do that too. Don't think you have to be stuck on one category or one subject. I know people, for example, that had started out because it's more in their nostalgia bank. They've started out with Barbies. And they learn all about Barbies, and they learn about the fashion concept of Barbies and how the study of Barbies and the whole notion of the Mattel industry was that you would sell a doll, but then the doll wasn't the thing. It was all of the costumes and the accessories and then another dress and something else that you'd buy for that one doll. And then they learned, hey, that's no different than the French fashion doll back in the 1860s and 70s. So they start to branch back into that. That's great. That's how you should do your collecting. Go with your instincts, but go with your brain as well, and just be patient.
That's great advice. And I think sage advice for a whole new generation of collectors and current generation of collectors who are active and looking to continue to evolve into the happy life of a collector and a lifetime of joy in this hobby. And you've given them wonderful advice, and I guess a moment just to say thank you for sharing 3 parts of this on The Curious Collector and some of the stories in your 55 years. And I think really candid looks at your career and where you've been through this have been just fascinating for even me to hear, and I'm your son. So,
hey, Stuart,
yeah.
Stuart, that was an auction title I used once, The Happy Life of a Collector.
I know, and I use it all the time in talking to people and lecturing. So, your titles do work out in the end. You've given so much to the doll world. Your contributions have been truly inspiring. For those of you who would like to learn more from Florence, you can go to Theriault's YouTube channel, and there are literally hundreds and hundreds of hours of continuing videos where she takes people down the roads of many of the great auctions we've held over the years and discussing dolls. They are a tool for us to help people see items coming up for auction, but as well, an incredible educational opportunity for new collectors to listen to Florence and learn about the features of each of these dolls that make them special. So definitely engage with her there. And Florence...
And unlike Betty Crocker, Stuart, I'm not going to make a pie.
You're not going to make a pie, and you are real. You are actually real. So people have heard that today or these past 3 episodes and know that you are a real person, and you're a compassionate person, and you're a deep person, and you have given so much to this world. I know you joke about you're going to keep doing this till 130, and as you always say, so far, so good.
So far, so good. You bet.
So far, so good. So keep going. The world loves you, loves your work, and we thank you for it. And thanks for joining us on these 3 episodes. And
it's been fun, Stuart.
Good. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. And we'll see you next week here for a new episode on The Curious Collector.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of The Curious Collector. The Curious Collector is hosted by Stuart Holbrook and produced by Tammy Theriault. We invite you to follow us on social media and feel free to leave any questions you have for Stuart on Facebook at Stuart Holbrook-Theriault or follow the Theriault Company Facebook page. And you can stay up to date with the latest auctions and events at Theriaults.com. We'll talk to you on the next episode of The Curious Collector.